everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of Brewing with 50 Bucks. This is the show where we take your favorite commander, slap on a $50 budget, and build a deck that is not only functional, but is able to pick you up the win. My name is Stefan. I'm joining you from the General Warfare headquarters. I'm glad you're joining us today. This week marks the second week of our 5-week set brews, where last week we brewed a commander from Kaldheim, and every week until the end of the year, we brew a commander from each set minus Modern Horizons 2. This week we tackle Strixhaven, the School of Mages. My previous Strixhaven brews were of Shadric Silverquill and Rutha Mercurial Artist, where you can see those decks on the top right hand side of your screen on the little icons there. Our commander on this trip to Strixhaven is Hofri Ghostforge. I had a hard time picking a commander from this set, so I decided to go Boros on this one and make a fun little combo deck. So despite some people's disdain for combo, this deck is brewed with the limitations of not being CDH affordable, so you're not going to be seeing very expensive cards on this list. It's mostly everything for $50 and below. So we had to take some liberties from there. And without further ado, without me rambling on too much, let's look at Hofri. Hofri Ghostforge is a 4/5 for 3 white and red legendary dwarf cleric that has spirits you control get +1/+1 and have trample and haste, and its ability, whenever another non-token creature you control dies, exile it. If you do, create a token that is a copy of that creature, except it's a spirit in addition to its other types, and it has, when this creature leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to your graveyard. Hofri allows us to get a secondary copy off a creature, especially profitable with the enter the battlefield abilities on most creatures in white and red. The goal of our deck is to either combo off with some of our few combo win, or to steal our opponent's creatures, use them against their owners, and sacrifice them to get our own copies of those creatures. And as always, we build these decks with a $50 budget in mind, which includes the price of the commander, which exclude the price of the basic lands in the deck, and we also offer a $5 overage compromise, which basically with these brews, it's basically up to $50. However, if there's a card or two you want to add in that was a little bit past the price of $50, you're more than welcome to add that card in as well. It's about a $5 overage, so it's not too much, and most people can afford the extra $5. You can find the deck list to this deck in the show notes down below, and if I can ask you of one small thing, if you like this kind of content, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and hitting that bell icon. One small click from you goes a long way with this channel. We're going to be operating with our standard array of categories in this deck, which includes artifacts, creatures, lands, sorceries, instants, and enchantments. And we're going to be getting started off with our most cumbersome of categories, which is creatures. We are running 21 creatures, which is about a fifth of the deck entirely. And so we're going to get started straight off with Angel of the Ruins, a 5/7 with flying for 7 mana. When it enters the battlefield, you exile up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantments, and it also has plane cycle. So with this, whenever we can sacrifice the Angel with Hofri out on the field, we're able to get a secondary trigger to exile up to 2 artifacts or enchantments, especially if we want to completely nullify our opponents from having those combo artifacts or combo enchantments on the field. We're getting a second go at getting rid of them as well. Belborka Spectral Sergeant is next. The reason I'm adding this in the deck is considering how many cards we have Hofri Exile in this deck. Belborka can very heavily impact that as well, considering with every exile card you have, Belborka's power goes up, and having a giant beater like Belborka on the field is pretty significant once his power matches his toughness. Brian Stoutarm is next. This is a very old commander from back when I started playing. However, we're adding him to the list, namely for that sacrifice ability. You pay a red, tap in and sacrifice another creature to have Brian Stoutarm deal damage equal to the sacrifice creature's power to a target player. With this is one of our sacrifice outlets for Hofri. It does require mana and to tap him, which is something you don't honestly want especially if you're going to be comboing off. However, it's still good to get an extra token on the field and to get an extra enter the battlefield ability. Burnishard is a staple in these budget decks, if you've already noticed from previous Brewing with 50 Bucks episodes. However, in this deck, it's just as valuable. Having you get extra mana in colors that don't often produce or are able to fetch extra lands on the field, and getting a second go at it with Hofri is just significant value for you. Getting 2 basic lands each time you sacrifice the Burnishard or the token itself. Now, Captivating Crew is our first Creature Steal card. The reason we're adding Creature Steal is because with Hofri, it makes the most sense to steal our opponent's creatures, sacrifice them, and get copies of our own, so that way we have giant beaters or just incredible value engines on our side of the field. Cathar Commando is next. This is a new card from Midnight Hunt with Flash, and you can sacrifice the Cathar, destroy target artifact or enchantment. So this is just practically instant speed removal in white. It's a 3-mana disenchant. I don't know, I kind of like it, especially getting a second go at it with Hofri, it coming back on the field and you're holding your opponents hostage for playing artifacts or enchantments. I don't know, it's pretty good, I would say. Coercive Recruiter is next, and basically this is another card steal card. With this, Coercive Recruiter steals one of your opponent's creatures, makes them pirates, and then you can just sacrifice the Coercive Recruiter to steal another player's creatures, or you sacrifice the stolen creature to get a token copy of your own. The ability on Hofri says whenever the token leaves the battlefield, you return the exile card to your graveyard. If I'm correct in thinking this, whenever you steal your opponent's creatures, those creatures end up in your graveyard, not your opponent's graveyard. Comment in the comments down below if this is wrong. Dark Dweller Oracle is next. This is another good sacrifice outlet for our creatures. With this, you get to exile the top card of your library and you get to play that card this turn. Especially so, it's one generic mana instead of having to restrict you to one color. You sacrifice a creature, you get to value off the top of your deck, and you get to play extra spells from the top of your deck if you wish. Dualcaster Mage is next. This is an obvious combo piece for a lot of decks, and this is actually a combo piece in our deck as well. Dualcaster Mage may seem innocuous, especially in a creature-based deck, but it combos off with one card in our deck, and that card, it's Faith's Reward. Now, I'll explain the combo of this deck once I get to our instance, and when I get to Faith's Reward. However, these two cards go infinite together, and if you don't know the reason why, I'll explain a little bit further down the line. However, with Dualcaster Mage, even if you don't have Faith's Reward, you can have the opportunity to copy any instant or sorcery spell, not only yours, but your opponent's as well, and you get to copy it, and you get to choose new targets for the copy as well. Fiend Hunter is next, and with this, it's an infinite combo, especially whenever you get to sacrifice this on repeat with other cards like Sun Titan and Thermopod, two other cards we'll be looking at in just a little bit. However, make mention that whenever you can exile a creature, and if you're exiling Sun Titan in this case, you're going to be getting infinite enter the battlefield of triggers. Karmic Guide is next, and everybody knows Karmic Guide's combo with Revelark. Yes, we're adding that in the deck. However, if you don't have Revelark, this is actually also a really good way to return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, especially if you already used the token from Hofri and sacrificed the token, or if you got the token killed in whatever way. You have to return a creature that you control to the battlefield. I'll explain a little bit more how the Revelark Karmic Guide combo works for those who don't know once I get to Revelark. Knight of the White Orchid is next, and this is just one of our extra ramp cards in white. White doesn't have too much ramp going for it, so whatever we can get, especially with Knight of the White Orchid. If you have opponent control more lands than you, you search your library for planes and put it onto the battlefield. Untapped too. Court Cartographer is next, and you get to do the exact same thing. However, it doesn't limit you to the amount of players with more lands than you. You can just search your library for planes and put it onto the battlefield. Unfortunately, it comes into play tapped, so you can't actually use that planes. However, this is still just as good. Now, Mistmoon Griffin is next, and this is actually an infinite combo piece with Hofri and with Goblin Bombardment. I'll explain the combo right now for you, actually. So the combo requires all your permanents to be on the field, so you can activate Goblin Bombardment by sacrificing the Griffin to deal a damage to any target. So Hofri and the Mistmoon Griffin will trigger. You should resolve Hofri's trigger first by exiling the Mistmoon Griffin, and then you create a spirit token copy of it. With whenever it dies, you return the exiled card to its owner's graveyard. Then the Mistmoon Griffin's trigger will be on the stack. Activate Goblin Bombardment by sacrificing the Mistmoon Griffin token to deal a damage to another target. When the Mistmoon Griffin token triggers, you return Mistmoon Griffin to your graveyard, and then the original Mistmoon Griffin will resolve, which returns Mistmoon Griffin from the top of your graveyard to the battlefield. And then that's how you create an infinite loop for infinite damage to your opponents. You could just keep up Hofri, and then for 6 mana, you could cast both, and then that's how you go infinite with the these cards. Molten Primordial is next, and this is another card steal card. Basically, for each of our opponents, you get to gain control of up to one target creature that player controls until the end of turn, and then with this, as long as you have a way to sacrifice those creatures, you basically are golden to attack with them, sacrifice them, and then get your own copies with them. Pilgrim of the Ages is next, and this is actually a Strixhaven card, so we're pretty much on theme with the set that we want to brew. So there's actually quite a few Strixhaven cards in this deck itself. I'll be highlighting each one moving forward. You get to actually search for a basic planes, and then you put it into your hand. So this is actually extra ramp for you. The 6 mana return from your graveyard to your hand is unnecessary, if I may speak freely about it. Since Hofri, you get a secondary trigger, and then once you have 6 mana, you have the option to return the Pilgrim. It's actually, you could do it at instant speed. It doesn't limit you from doing that, so if you have the extra 6 mana, just return it to your hand at the end step before your turn. Revelark is next, and as I previously mentioned with Karmic Guide, with this, we have an infinite combo on our hands, so we need Revelark, Karmic Guide, and a Sacrifice Outlet for infinite Enter the Battlefield triggers. So for this instance, let's just say we have a Thermopod on the field. So with this, you need Karmic Guide in the graveyard, you need one of your Sacrifice Outlets on the field, and you need 5 mana available, 4 and a white. You cast Revelark, sacrifice Revelark and the other creature with 2 or less power. You get to generate whatever mana you have to the Thermopod. Target Karmic Guide in the graveyard and a creature with power 2 or less. So let's just say Karmic Guide and Solemn Simulacrum. You get to return both of them to the field. Karmic Guide will trigger. You target Revelark with the Karmic Guide, and then you sacrifice Karmic Guide and the power 2 or less creature to Thermopod, and you get 2 red mana. And Solemn will trigger, getting a extra land on the field, and whenever it dies, gets an extra card on the field. This combo requires Hofri not to be on the battlefield. So this way, we have a combo with our commander on the field, and we have 2 combos that don't need our commander, and we have 1 that does need our commander. So this way, we want to flex a little bit all over the field, so that way we don't obviously need Hofri to be on the field itself. Solemn Simulacrum is next. With this, you already know how good the value engine of Solemn is from my previous explanation. However, it's extra ramp on a creature, and it's extra card draw whenever he dies. Sun Titan is next. And as I mentioned to you before, this is obviously an infinite combo piece with Fiend Hunter. However, with Sun Titan, even when he enters the battlefield or attacks, if you have a creature or anything with mana value 3 or less, you get to return it to the battlefield. So this includes lands, this includes other permanents with mana value 3 or less. And our next card is actually Thermopod, which I will explain the combo to you right now. So with Thermopod's ability, you get to sacrifice a creature and add 1 red mana to your mana pool. So the combo itself requires the Fiend Hunter in the graveyard, you need a Thermopod on the field, and you need 6 mana available, 4 and 2 white. Basically, you cast Sun Titan, bring back Fiend Hunter, you exile Sun Titan with the Fiend Hunter's triggered ability, you sacrifice Fiend Hunter to the Thermopod, you generate a red mana. Fiend Hunters leave you the battlefield will trigger, return Sun Titan to the battlefield, Sun Titan's enter the battlefield ability will trigger, bring back the Fiend Hunter, repeat, and you get infinite red mana from there. So with this, Thermopod is also a really good attack outfit just for anything in general, even if you're stealing your opponent's creatures. And the last card we're going to be looking at in terms of our creatures is Wisp-Mare. With this, I wanted to add an Evoke card, so that way we can get extra value with Hofri on the field. We pay 1 mana to have a Wisp-Mare destroy a target enchantment. With Hofri, we just exile it and get another token of Wisp-Mare just destroying another enchantment as well. Next we're looking at is our sorceries. This is the second week in a row, and the second brew in a row actually, where the sorceries completely outweigh the amount of instants, but this time it's practically double the amount of instants in this deck. So let's not harp on that. We have 19 sorceries to go through. We'll start off with Active Treason. So a lot of our sorceries include these creature stealing cards. Active Treason is no stranger to this. You basically get control of a target creature until end of turn and tap it. It gains haste till end of turn. This is one of the ways we're going to be stealing our opponent's creatures. And with Active Treason being a very popular card amongst decks that like to steal creatures, it's a no-brainer to add this in this deck as well. Bloody Betrayal is next, and basically the only difference to this is that it is only gaining you a blood token. With this, you get just this extra rummage, but you steal a creature nonetheless. Cathartic Reunion is next, and with this you get to rummage your deck, discard 2 cards, and draw 3. Cleansing Nova is one of our few board wipes that we have in this deck. That way, in the event that we don't have any creatures, or if everything just goes to poo, basically we have an option to just reset the board in our favor. Devastating Mastery is next. This is another really good, this is actually one of the better board wipes in this deck. It is very costly on the white mana, but if you have enough white mana to activate it, you destroy all non-land permanents. This way, you're resetting the board for all your opponents. Goat Nap is next. Basically, you steal a creature, and if it was a goat, it gets +3/+0 until end of turn. Hijack is next. You gain control of target artifact or creature until end of turn, and same thing as before. Late to Dinner is next. Basically, you get to return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and you create a food token for that. So, with this, for 4 mana, you get to return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield, and you get an extra artifact that allows you to gain some life back. Mob Rule is next. This is just mass creature steal, and with enough mana, and or if you have a way to sacrifice all those creatures, you get a creature token for each one of them back on your side of the field, and they get an additional boost. And not only that, they also have haste and trample, so they're getting a buff, and they're also getting 2 very key words for aggro decks. Pax Betrayal is next, and it's another creature steal card, targeted creature steal card I should say, and if it was a werewolf or a wolf, you scry 2. And I don't imagine too many players play Werewolf Tribal. If you do, please let me know in the comments down below, because this might be a fun card against your deck. But nonetheless, it's another targeted creature spell steal card, and rinse and repeat from before. Plead for Guidance is next. The reason we're adding this card mostly is because we want to get our enchantments that are sack outlets. This is the only reason we're running Plead for Guidance. It's very mana costly and mana heavy. However, for 2 enchantments, it's not a bad tutor. Thrice of Loyalty is next. Rinse and repeat target creature steal card. Reconstruct History is next. This is another Strixhaven card. And this is actually one of the better Boros cards that has come out in Strixhaven, in my personal opinion. You get to return up to 1 artifact, 1 target enchantment, 1 target instant card, 1 sorcery, and up to 1 target planeswalker from the grave to your hand, and you exile the card. So you, at the very most, return 5 cards to your hand off a 4 mana spell. I don't know why this is such a budget card. Maybe it's because it doesn't see too much play, but this is just a really good card to add in almost any deck that runs red and white. Rip Apart is next, another Strixhaven card. With this, you get to choose either to deal 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker, or destroy target artifact or enchantment for 2 mana. I like the secondary ability to have the flexibility to destroy an artifact or enchantment, but dealing 3 damage to a creature gives you some leeway to completely cripple your opponents from having some extra advantage over you. Secret Rendezvous is another Strixhaven card. With this, it's one of the few card draw cards in white where you and target opponent each draw 3 cards. I do like that card a lot, and you've seen this card already in my Shadrick Silverquill deck, if you've seen that deck already. If not, there's going to be a link on the top right for you to check it out once again. Storm of Souls is next. This is a very new card, I should say. To return all creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, those that are not already exiled, and each one of them is this 1/1 spirit with flying in addition to its other types. You exile the card after it's cast, and you get to return each creature you have in the graveyard. So even if you don't have a creature, or even if you don't have anything exiled under Hofri, this is going to be really good to just resurrect all your creatures. The limitation of it being 1/1 spirits, it sucks, not going to lie, but it's better than not having a board state at all. So that's the reason why this card is in the deck. It's just recursion. Threaten is next, and it's another rinse and repeat target creature steal card. Tragic Arrogance is another board wipe. However, with this, instead of completely blowing out your opponents, for each player you get to choose from among the permanents that player controls up to 1 artifact, 1 creature, 1 enchantment, and 1 planeswalker that player controls, and they have to sacrifice the rest. So you get to choose those triggers. Keep that in mind. So for each one of the creatures your opponents have, if they have a go wide strategy, they only can keep 1 of them, and you can just choose a token. If they have Enchantress deck, they can only keep 1 enchantment. If they're artifact heavy, they only get to keep 1 artifact. Rinse and repeat for each one of the subtypes I just previously named, but you get the gist of it. And this is a really strong card that I don't think a lot of people play. This is a very underrated card. Last card of our sorcery list is Traitorous Blood. Rinse and repeat, basically, except with this, it gains trample and haste until end of turn. The next category we're going to be getting into is our instants. We are running 9 instants. So in comparison to our sorceries, we're running 10 less instants in this deck. So let's get started with Active Aggression. Rinse and repeat, creature steal a card, but with this you get to actually pay 2 Phyrexian mana. So with the Phyrexian mana you get to pay it in either a red or 2 life. So if you only have 3 mana available, pay 4 life and steal a creature. Crush Contraband is next. This is one of my favorite white cards to put in any deck. You get to exile 1 artifact, exile 1 enchantment, or you get to exile both. Disenchant is next. For 1 and a white, you destroy target artifact or enchantment, and it's on the budget side, so why not? Faith's Reward is next, and as I promised before, I'll explain to you how Faith's Reward works with Dualcaster Mage. With Faith's Reward and Dualcaster Mage, we add 1 more card to this list. We're gonna add Goblin Bombardment just for the sake of this. So with this, you need Goblin Bombardment on the battlefield and the rest of the cards in your hand and enough to cast them both. So you basically need 7 mana and Goblin Bombardment on the field. Basically cast Faith's Reward first and hold priority with it on the stack. So this has to be the first card on the stack. And then with it on the stack, cast Dualcaster Mage. Target Faith's Reward with Dualcaster Mage is enter the battlefield trigger, copying it. And with 1 copy on the stack, sacrifice the Dualcaster Mage and any other creature you control to the Goblin Bombardment, dealing the damage to target player. Resolve the copy of Faith's Reward, recurring all creatures sacrificed this way. And then Dualcaster Mage's enter the battlefield trigger will trigger again, copy Faith's Reward again, and then loop it over, and you get an infinite damage outlet. So even if you don't have the combo in hand, Faith's Reward is actually still pretty good, especially after a board wipe. So if your opponent's board wipe and your entire board with mainly creatures, play Faith's Reward and you get them all back. Grab the Rain is next, and this is another target creature steal card. However, with this is actually an Entwine card. So you get 2 options here. With the first one is until end of turn, you gain control of target creature and it gains haste. And the second one is sacrifice a creature, grab the Reins deals damage equal to that creature's power to target creature or player. And the Entwine cost is 2 and a red. So if you have 7 mana available, you can actually play grab the Reins, steal an opponent's creature, and then sacrifice it with Hofri on the field to get a token copy and to deal some damage to an opponent or creature. Heartwarming Redemption is next. This is basically a rummage card, and with this, the reason I'm adding this is because a lot of the times you may have dead hands, so with the option to discard all the cards in your hand, you get to draw that many back, and you gain the extra life for each number of each card you had in your hand. Actually not a bad trade-off, and you get entirely fresh hand to boot. Return to Dust is next. This is allowing you to exile a target artifact or enchantment, and if it's on your main phase, you get to exile another one. So you get a 2/4 on 1 card if you do this on your main phase. If not, it's just one-off, exile a target artifact or enchantment. Swords to Plowshares is next. This is another staple card in any white deck. Exile target creature, its controller gains life equal to its power. I think every single white deck, or almost every single white deck, plays this card, so it's no stranger to these lists itself. The last instant we're talking about is Thrill of Possibility. With this, it's another rummage card, allowing you to discard a card and draw 2 in its place. Next category we're looking at is our artifacts. We are running the exact same number of artifacts as we are instants. We're running 9 of them. Let's get started right away with Armillary Sphere. I've decided to add another Armillary Sphere in this deck as I did the last deck I brewed, which was Toralf. The reason why, it's a budget way to get 2 basic lands out of your deck and put them into your hand, so that way you're not missing land drops. It's a pretty efficient card, and it's still pretty good for its cost. Oro Signet is next. It's a Signet. Everybody runs in their decks. If you're not playing a CDH deck, for 1 mana you get to add both your colors. Commander Sphere is next, a budget staple. Add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. You sacrifice it to draw a card. Demon Male Hauberk is next. Equip creature gets +4/+2, and the equip is sacrifice a creature. This is actually one of the ways where we can steal one of our opponent's creatures and just sacrifice them right off the bat. Just keep equipping and sacrifice our opponent's creatures with Hofri on the field to get our tokens of each one of those opponent's creatures. Hedron Archive is next, adding 2 colorless mana and then 2 and tap it to sacrifice it and draw 2 cards. Letter of Acceptance is next, again another Strixhaven card. Add 1 mana of any color and then 2 and tap it to sacrifice it and draw a card. Liquid Metal Torque is next. You tap it to add a colorless mana, and you tap it to make target non-land permanently become an artifact in addition to its other types until end of turn. Not completely useful. The colorless mana is the most important part of this card, so it's just funny. The Celestis is next. I decided to add this card just for fun and just because I thought it was funny. The reason I'm adding this is mainly for the additional mana it produces. However, for 3 mana, you get to switch it from night and day, and whenever you do so, you can gain a life and you can rummage, basically draw a card and discard a card too. So I'm not saying it's a good card, but it has its perks. The last card we're going to be looking at is Witch's Oven. For 1 mana, you get to tap at sacrifice a creature and create a food token, and if its toughness was 4 or greater, you create 2 of them instead. This is one of our sacrifice outlets that we have as well. However, this is also another tap ability, so it has limited uses. You can still keep it up and then sacrifice your opponent's creatures, or sacrifice a creature in the stead of it getting targeted for removal or one of the creatures getting targeted for removal. The next category we're looking at is our enchantments. We are running 6 enchantments. This is another deck that's running very, very few enchantments. However, each one of these enchantments brings a lot to the table, and you'll see why with our first card, Barrage of Expendables. 1 red mana for an enchantment. With 1 red mana, sacrifice a creature. Barrage of Expendables deals 1 damage to any target. This paired up with Thermopod and any one of our combos pings our opponents to death. This is like a pseudo Goblin Bombardment. It's an extra little card that allows you to deal damage to your opponents. Fanatical Devotion is next. This one requires no mana to tap it, no mana nor to tap it, but you just get to sacrifice a creature and regenerate target creature. This is one of the best ways to use our infinite combo wins. Goblin Bombardment is next. I explained in very great deal with my previous 2 combo explanations how this works, but you can also just sacrifice one of your opponent's creatures to deal 1 damage to any target. Makeshift Munitions is next. For 1, and you sacrifice either an artifact or a creature to deal 1 damage to any target. Explanation of Goblin Bombardment and Barrage Expendables inserted in this card as well. Martyr's Cards is next. Again, another card that doesn't require you to tap any mana or to tap it, but you get to sacrifice a creature to prevent all damage to a creature or player from one source. So even if you are getting attacked, this still is actually of great use. And lastly, Song of the World Soul. This is the only enchantment that doesn't have a sacrifice creature. However, whenever you cast a spell, you populate. So you get to cast a spell, and then you get to create a token that's a copy of a creature you control. So you get to ramp up the amount of tokens you have on the field made with Hofri too. So this actually adds a lot of value to the deck. The last category we're going to get into is our land base. This is the fuel to our engine. We are running 35 lands in this deck. We start off with Command Tower, basically a staple for where you just tap it to add a mana of any color of your commander's color identity. Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse is next. Basically, you sacrifice both of them just to search your library for a basic land and put it into the battlefield tapped. Mirror Landscape allows you to do the exact same thing. These 3 cards are put in almost every single deck. Mirror Landscape I put into practically every deck itself. Basically, it comes into play tapped. It actually adds colorless mana, but for 2 tap and sacrifice, you get to put up to 2 basic lands on the battlefield instead. Temple of Triumph is next, and this is the only tap land we're adding in this deck, and when it enters the battlefield, you scry 1, but it taps for a red or a white. We're adding also 15 mountains and 15 plains in this deck. And that's how you build a dwarf that can resurrect the dead and profit at your opponent's expense. Our total budget of this deck is $50, which includes the price of the commander and excludes the basic land count. So we arrive at a deck price on today's episode at $43.98, making this, I believe, at the current price, the least expensive deck we've ever brewed on this channel. And needless to say, this is brewing with $50. We don't even need our $5 overage compromise, so you can literally pick this up for around $45, and you have extra wiggle room to add whatever cards you want to add in there. So with that, let's get into some pros, some cons, and some out of budget recommendations for the deck. Now let's get a look at some of our pros and cons of this deck. The first pro of this is that it has a good amount of ramp. I've play tested this deck quite a bit, and I was able to go as early as turn 3 Hofri on the field and turn 5 win with the Mist Moon Griffin combo. So it's easy enough to get on the field, and you have enough ramp to where you're never going to be in a terrible position to not play your commander or any card that you have in your hand. And you have a lot of backup combos too. So as I mentioned before, there's multiple ways you can combo off in this deck, be it with the Mist Moon Griffin combo, whether it be the Revelar Karmic Guard combo, or even if it's just the Dual Caster Mage and Faith's Reward combo. You have multiple ways to actually combo off in this deck, and you have multiple ways to do so. And you can easily steal your opponent's creatures. We have an enormous amount of creature steal cards in this deck, so that way you are never in a position where you're not going to be stealing your opponent's creatures and profiting off it as well. The cons of this deck, and the most glaring one, is that it has very unreliable draws. There's no card filter really in this deck. Basically, the only way we can do that is through Rummage, and maybe through Bel Borca, where he gets allow you to exile a card from the top of your library. But other than that, we don't have a lot of draw ways to manipulate the top of our deck. Our combos are not always available, so despite the fact we're running multiple combos in this deck, we may not always have access to them, and the fact that if one of our main pieces is gone, we don't really have a way to win unless we're just going to be stealing our opponent's creatures. Stealing creatures is great, however, it's useless against creatureless decks. Like, if you're playing against Storm decks, or if you're playing decks that don't rely on creatures to be on the field itself, then the creature steal cards in this deck are completely useless. And finally, it can have idle turns where you're just spinning your wheels, not really doing anything, and you just don't have anything to play on your turns, so you're just gonna be sitting idle with a bunch of cards in your hand and nothing to do. Now let's get into some out of budget recommendations for this deck. These recommendations are given to those who want to build this deck, but you want to add anything above the $50 mark. So these are just 4 recommendations I would put in this deck. The first of which is Sneak Attack, and for obvious reasons. With Sneak Attack, you put a creature from your hand on the battlefield, and with Hofri out, when at the end step, you get to sacrifice that creature and you get a token of that creature ultimately. So this is just basically speeding up the process for you to steal a creature, or to put a creature that you have in your hand out of the field without having to pay the cost for it. Next is Terror of the Peaks. This is actually a very scary card to have on the field, especially with Hofri and with his abilities to make tokens. So whenever another creature enters the battlefield in your control, it deals damage equal to the creature's power to any target. So even if you're stealing creatures, you sacrifice them and those creatures come onto the field, Terror of the Peaks will trigger and will deal the damage to your opponents. So imagine how many times you'd be doing that, especially if you're comboing off with like Revelark, or if you're with Dual Caster Mage. Those 2 increments of 2 are just going to stack over time and just immediately kill your opponents. Next is Phyrexian Altar. This is an easy choice to add to any deck that requires combos like Revelark combo, or combos that require you to sacrifice creatures, where you sacrifice them and add 1 mana of any color. This is just easy to add, so that's why it's part of it. The last one is Blasting Station. This is another one where, especially with the Revelark combo, you can sacrifice it and deal up and ping your opponents or their opponent's creatures for 1 damage, and whenever a creature comes into play, you may untap Blasting Station. So this in itself is just a very valuable card. Not even that expensive, so you can even add it to the deck if you want, and it'll just boost it up to that $50 mark. That would be one of my main recommendations to get it to the $50 mark, but apart from that, that is my last recommendation for this deck. And that's where I'm going to leave it off today, guys. If you made it this far in the video, thank you very, very much. I truly appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this kind of content, please consider liking this video, share it amongst your friends and your play groups, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon. One small click from you helps this channel greatly and be able to reach more people who enjoy this kind of content. You can also follow me on my socials. You see on the bottom left-hand side of your screen, my Instagram, my TikTok, my Facebook, and my Twitter page. And you can also recommend deck ideas and video ideas there as well. I post every week on Fridays. And last thing before I leave you off today, in our official 5-week count, we can officially scratch off Strixhaven from the list. That's 2 down, 3 to go. Next week, we'll be looking at a commander from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, the Magic the Gathering, and Dungeons and Dragons crossover set. So tune in next week for one of those commanders. And until then, guys, cheers, everybody.